And there we are. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Moffat on Money, Saturday Night Live and Rambling, hosted by the lovely, gracious E Train and
And you.
with her sidekick. I'm Clay. Good to be with you tonight. We appreciate y'all joining us. Hey, Sky, how are you doing? Has been
How
a,
you doing?
a has been a busy few days, but good to see you. Hope you are doing well. Um, hope Irwin is back from all of his travels. We missed y'all. It is a busy time, truly is. And next
Yes, it
week,
is.
this week has been crazy with the elections, and um, can't say I've had much babysitting duty. Had a little bit, but
Oh,
hey, Mutt, good to see you. And Jane,
hi,
hey,
everybody.
hey to the family. It's good to see y'all.
I know. I feel like it's been a while since I guess we didn't do Tuesday,
Tuesday, yeah.
but it's been a while. Yes. Oh,
It's,
his phone's
it's
dead. Oh, Johnson. Fair enough.
you, you mean y'all aren't like in the same room trying to use the same camera and keyboard and all? Y'all are cute. We love y'all. Really do.
Jane. Hi, honey.
Jane, how's everything up in Pennsylvania? We y'all are the news of the week oftentimes.
Oh, of the day, it seems.
Yeah, just a critical state this time of year over the next few days, and everything you do or whatever is just being magnified and put under a microscope. So hope everything is doing well as far as the election in your neck of the woods.
Yes. I wanted to mention something before we get, started too much into the political aspect. I wanted to give a shout out to Peanut, RIP. I don't know if y'all have heard this. Okay, I'll email it to Clay here shortly.
Yeah, remember my name?
No, I was trying to think if I should do it to me or to you.
Either way, it's fine.
So okay, so I'll probably do it to you in a minute. But
Okay.
yes, this is Peanut. He was a pet squirrel. He was the number one viewed squirrel on the interwebs. The first one on
The
TikTok to get a
picture's
billion.
not up.
Oh, oh, I didn't present, did I? Shoot, sorry, that's my fault. Uh,
Yeah, you got to go through a little bit of process on StreamYard to get pics up. There it comes.
There's Mr. Peanut. He was seized in New York and euthanized. Like I said, he's 7-year-old little baby squirrel, not a baby anymore. But his mom and dad actually rescued him. His Peanut's mama, his real mama, was hit by a car, and so this is the lovely man. I know his name is in here. Mark. I can't say that, Clay. I'm going to butcher it. Right
So you
here.
want me to butcher it instead?
Yes. Yep.
Actually, I can't see it. My screen's a little small.
Oh. Um. Okay. Anyway, he also had a little brother, a raccoon, who was also taken and euthanized.
Well, why were they taken?
Well, because there was an anonymous complaint. This is an indoor squirrel, an indoor raccoon. Anonymous complaint, and
That,
the
that he'd
department,
had for 7 years.
yeah, Department of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation did a 5-hour no warrant raid on the home. Then they got a warrant, took both of the animals. They were in custody and then euthanized them.
They euthanized him. Why?
I'm not real sure.
I heard that they wanted to check for rabies, even though there was no sign of rabies. There was no complaint of rabies. Both animals were acting normally. No no signs of any disease.
Yeah.
And of
And the
course,
money,
to
yeah,
test to test an animal for rabies, you have
have to
to
kill it. Yeah.
examine its brain.
So, and they started a nonprofit to help animals, animal rescue. It's Peanuts Freedom Farm, and they were donating to veterinarians and caregivers for rescue animals with the money they got off of his TikTok account. Yeah, it's freaking sad. So, R.I.P. Peanut. I think it's just crazy that just some random person can go on and just say, "Hey, random complaint from God knows who, somebody who was just mad at him." I don't know, but I think he's suing now.
Well, I hope he takes them for everything they're worth. I really do. It just boggles my mind that somebody can come in and seize an animal, a pet,
Mhm,
a long-term pet that is absolutely not bothering anybody else, is well cared for,
mhm.
and put it to death for a worthless test
Yep.
with no court order, no judge, no reason at all. That just boggles my mind.
Mine too.
Um, I mean, there to me now. I love animals. Got a soft spot for them, and this just irritates the hell out of me.
It
This
should.
just boggles my mind that some bureaucrat could do that at whim, at absolute whimsy.
Mhm.
They don't even
And
have
why
to
would
know
they
the people that there's a complaint and investigate it.
why
Anyway,
would they even they did a no warrant search and then did the warrant afterwards to take the animals. Like that's crazy.
well, yeah, I don't understand even why the warrant was given because there was no sickness, no health, anything.
Mm-mm. He's an indoor squirrel.
Yeah.
He wasn't hurting
Uh,
nobody.
Mutt probably did not have a license to be a wildlife rehabilitator. I don't think he was advertising himself or selling his services as a wildlife rehabilitator.
Mm-mm.
He just found a little animal, a little squirrel, kept it as a pet. I mean, people do that or have done that for wild
Yeah.
animals for centuries. Now, if they're, running a business as a wildlife rehab center and going out and collecting animals for people, charging fees, whatever, okay, if the state has to license something, then okay, but just a random dude finding an animal, giving it a good home for 7 years, loving it, the animal loving him. I mean, there are videos of them doing all sorts of little,
I,
playthings, and the
I couldn't
animal was
play this.
animal was clearly attached to him.
So, yeah. Anyway, that's Peanut.
Yeah. So
Jane, the family is civilly suing the state of New York. They should.
yeah, we will actually try to track that and keep y'all updated on it because it ought to be kind of an interesting thing. We're not obviously not a law tube channel. Maybe we're um, I can't say an animal rights channel. We're a offended by bureaucratic
Use-
abuse of animals channel.
Yes.
So,
And let's see. Muddy. Most places require to have wild animals, but someone that has 20 dogs and 30 cats is okay. That's true.
yeah,
It is sad.
I was looking, we're going to talk some about taxes tonight, but I was looking at a list. I didn't save it, but, compiling a list of all the taxes everybody pays just routinely. And there's like, 40 or 50 different taxes that you pay just in the ordinary course of living in this country. And it's like, government even sometimes regulates what you can do with the water that falls on your roof.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, enough. That's just too much. It has just grown so intrusive, my opinion.
I agree.
And that kind of brings us to the topic tonight. We are going to talk about the current election, and particularly how the ideas espoused by the candidates can impact you. And I'll go ahead and say this up front. Anytime an economist or finance person is talking about impacts of ideas, you get into your, I guess, personal perspective, personal thoughts, personal, um, I can't call it theology. What am I looking for?
Opinions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have been, been clinically trained in theory and application as far as, finance and economic matters.
Mm-hmm.
And I make no bones about it. If you hadn't guessed by now, I'm pretty much a small government guy. I want the government off my ass and out of my wallet. Make no bones about it. I think I can run my life better than a bureaucrat 1,500 miles away in DC, wherever I am. So, most of the thoughts that I have in terms of the impact, there will be some economists or finance people that disagree. And I'm good with that. But I'll be glad to take a look and compare history, both in terms of the impact of these policies that we've seen previously in history, which is where I draw my opinions from, and in terms of our predictions or commentary on what's going on in the economy and the world. I'm pretty satisfied with my track record in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so what I share with you, I'm not going to say everybody will like or agree with, but these are as close to my no spin, no frills, just a straightforward analysis of tax and economic proposals and how they might impact the American economy if implemented, and how they'll impact you personally if implemented. And the only thing really I have to go on in terms of their ideas is what they have stated that they want. Hey, Muddy, thanks. Appreciate you popping in. And we hope to see you again soon sometime.
Mm-hmm.
Night to you. The only thing I have to go off of in terms of their proposals is what they have publicly pronounced. In some of these things, I'm kind of wondering if they really mean it, which I really can't get into because I can't judge their motives. I can only judge their actions and, their words.
And you can't read minds and you can't predict the future.
No, and I can't predict what Congress will pass.
Mm-hmm.
So, we kind of dive into some of this with those issues always lurking in the background. So let's start off by looking at the key proposals that the candidates have put on the table. And the proposals, again, aren't theoretical. They have implications or serious consequences for businesses, for workers, for investors, any and all. So we'll start off by taking a look at Vice President Harris's proposals. One of the most noted ones and one of the most consistent ones, one of the ones I am confident she will try to implement, is increasing the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%. Now, I saw somebody, describe her proposal as a small increase in corporate taxes. I can't really define small, but that increase is 33%, which to me is not small. That's pretty damn significant. The the impact on corporations would mean reduced profits. It means they have to increase their prices because and I've mentioned this before. Corporations don't pay taxes; they collect them. Taxes are an expense, just like labor, just like rent, just like raw materials. Corporations have to maintain a profit margin in order to support the price of their stock, to attract capital, new investors, et cetera, to compensate their current investors. If they don't maintain that profitability, investors are going to, bail out, and then the company will be left stranded. So they've got to maintain a profit margin. Well, if taxes are increased, it will cause an initial compression of that. They'll have to raise prices. If they raise prices, they'll become less competitive. They'll sell less. They'll have, less money to reinvest in new equipment or new products, hire new people, etc. Generally, what we have seen in the past when taxes are raised is that it leads to discouraged investment and cost cutting. And when I say cost cutting, I mean laying off workers, which is probably the easiest move that corporations can make to trim expenses generally.
Can I make a quick what do you call it? Okay, let me put it this way. When I was working with people in Medicare, I would say, okay, so the government's going to pay 80% of your bill if you go to the hospital, whatever. You get 20. And they're like, oh, they're thinking like $100, $20. That's not bad. I'm like, yeah, but if your hospital bill is $1 million, that's $200,000. Can you afford that? Like percentages, they seem smaller, or the increments seem smaller, but it's a lot of money.
And keep in mind, ultimately, the corporations don't pay the tax. The consumers do. So whoever buys their product is paying that tax. The corporations don't pay taxes. They just collect them, pass it through to the government. So the higher the taxes, corporate taxes, the higher the prices. And we generally refer to higher prices as inflation.
So they're going to tax the corporation. And you say that sounds good. It's going to be a higher tax. They're going to pay their share when in all actuality, you're going to pay it. Prices go up, you're paying more. That's the deal.
So that's one of her main goals, one of her main propositions. The second one is a millionaire's tax, or what I call or title a millionaire's tax. She has basically stated she supports a surtax on ultra high income earners, those making over 10 million a year. Now, most people like, hello, Erwin, how are you doing? Good to see you, man. Appreciate you joining in. Most people like it or are okay with it if somebody else is getting taxed. And the rich, everybody's like, the rich ought to be paying their fair share. But when you ask people how much should the upper 1% or upper 10% be paying, they'll say, give, some number. They ought to be paying, the upper 1% ought to pay 10, 20% of the taxes or whatever. Well, they pay the majority of the taxes. I forget the exact number, 60%. I can look it up without much difficulty. But the problem with taxing the very rich is that the very rich are mobile. they can move. They can take their money and move it to a lower tax environment. We used to describe this as capital, which when I say capital, just think of investment money or labor. Your time is capital. Things of value. Capital is mobile, and capital will seek out its highest and best use. And I've never known an investor or a person who thinks his money can be used better by the government than it can by themselves.
Fair enough. Fair point.
So, France tried a millionaire's tax a decade ago, had to cancel it or suspended after 6 months. They ended up taking a year or two to get rid of the law, but they had 5,000 millionaires move out of France, took their money with them, took their income with them. New York, California have been bleeding millionaires. Most anybody that can afford to move is leaving or has left. So they have lost a slug of their tax base. And the idea of this kind of tax is intended to redistribute wealth. So not only does it end up hurting the government in terms of total revenues collected, it hurts, the poor and the middle class because they take their capital out of the country. There's not the investment, there's not new jobs created, there's not, expansion of existing firms funded, or it's more expensive for them to fund it. There's just less investment and more assets being moved offshore. That doesn't help anyone. In terms of middle class impacts, Vice President Harris supports letting the 2017 tax cuts expire. Now, she has stated once that the increases in the taxes will be limited to those making $400,000 and above. We don't know exactly what that number is, but we know that from what we've seen, with inflation over the past 4 years, that even though people's average wage has gone up, they've lost purchasing power. They can't afford the same lifestyle that they could before. Well, that 400,000 is an arbitrary target. And what you want to bet, it gets reduced year by year or over time. Income taxes have always worked this way. The original income tax was only going to be, 2% on millionaires. Look where it is now. The average American, average working American works the months of January, February, March, and most of April just to pay their taxes. Before you pay for your house, before you pay for food, before you, take care of your kids, your family, before you save for the future, you're paying taxes, a chunk of taxes. So where it exactly will cut, don't know. Now, historically, consistently, as a senator, VP, even as DA, she has never in her life that I could find opposed to raising taxes on any group. She's also stated significant support to fund green energy programs, just like they've been doing the past 4 years. She stated these green power or social initiatives should be paid for largely through increased taxes. So her plan devotes a significant amount of money towards green energy subsidies, but she hasn't detailed the taxes. But we've seen some inclinations in the past. We've seen some in the administration float increased taxes on gas sales. We've seen them float increased taxes on carbon generated energy, which is the vast majority of energy generated in this country. So we can pretty easily imagine where the taxes to pay for, some of these continued green initiatives are going to come from. It's not hard. A few other ideas that she has thrown out. She's thrown out a ban on price gouging. That's all she said. Now, she hadn't listed any specifics. She has not defined gouging, and she certainly hasn't defined how she plans to cure that.
She did say at one point that some grocery stores were taking advantage of inflation and charging more than they needed to boost their bottom line.
Yeah, I wish I had thought of that because I actually remember that, and I remember looking at that 2 or 3 months ago, and the
Mhm.
numbers just don't back that if you look at
They
their
don't.
actual profits and their margins. Um, and gouging, while I'm on the topic, most people think gouging is a bad thing. Probably most everybody except for me. Um, and I've talked about this, before. When a company can quote unquote, there's a crisis or a shortage or something, and a company raises its price, that does a number of things. One, it helps prevent hoarding.
Mhm.
It helps to ensure that people only buy what they absolutely need. And it promotes wider distribution. I give the example of Katrina, the hurricane that leveled New Orleans, southern Louisiana, and wiped out their electrical system and particularly their water filtration plants. And so
Mhm.
there was a shortage of water in New Orleans for a week or two, which was getting kind of critical. Well, there was this, and I wish I'd saved the article. I didn't, but I remember reading an article about a sharecropper, almost. I guess that's what you would call him, in Mississippi, central Mississippi, who saw there was a water shortage. He had an old beat up car. So he took all of his tools, went and pawned them, and bought as many bottles of water as he could. He drove them down to New Orleans and sold them for $10 a bottle, $15 a bottle. He was gouging, quote unquote. But what he was actually doing, in my opinion, is he had pawned his future. He had put his only means of transportation at great risk. The car was not in good shape, as you can imagine. And if it broke down on the way, he had no money to repair it. He had no money to eat off of, no hotel room.
Could you say he invested in his future?
He took a big risk
Yeah.
and he invested in his future. Second thing he did was by taking this huge risk to him, he increased the supply of water to New Orleans. And when he sold out all he could, he drove back, bought more cases, went back to New Orleans. He did this several times over a few days period. He made more money in a few days than he had made in a year previously. And he increased the supply of water. Now, people, the point is that when you see high prices, that's an incentive for individuals, for companies, whatever, to take risk, to try to do things they otherwise wouldn't in order to take advantage of that. So what it ends up doing actually is, one, ensuring that nobody buys cases of water just to store for their family's convenience, or many less people do. And it increases the supply, which leads to driving the prices down relatively rapidly. That's a good thing to me. All in all, that's a good thing. It rewards people taking significant risk, and it increases the supply of a critically short good. Now, it took a few days, but some of the breweries there, like the Budweiser brewery, instead of bottling beer, they just bottled water. They didn't, add the yeast and the hops and all that. They just went ahead and bottled water. And, several other people started shipping water to New Orleans. So, by the end of the week, there was some supply. But this guy responded immediately. And, it's pretty much impossible for FEMA or others to respond, large suppliers to respond that quickly. Even if they can produce, distributing it, there's no way to, when the streets are flooded and, all the debris is around, distribution is limited. Only small vehicles. So,
Erwin has a question. I think I have a follow-up question if you don't cover it.
okay. Let's see. Does business and Wall Street favor Harris or Trump? Who will build the best team to run a good economy? We're going to talk about this some, as far as the economy. In terms of Wall Street, it's interesting.
That was my question. That could go one of two ways.
It goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people in Wall Street are greatly concerned about the direction of the country, the debt, et cetera, et cetera. If they have those concerns, they're backing Trump. Some people like the close working, let me just call it a close working relationship that the administration has with major Wall Street firms. Jamie Dimon of Morgan Stanley, CEO of Morgan Stanley, just announced for Miss VP Harris a week or two ago. And the administration has very good relationships with two or three of the major investment banking firms. So it's there's a split, and it depends on what the organizations are most concerned with. And even
Or
if you look at employee contributions, they're split.
what they're going to get the most benefit from, and that depends upon a whole bunch of other factors.
Most of the large investment banks prefer a very strong regulatory environment, like Sarbanes-Oxley. The bill was, and these are round numbers, the bill was 800 pages long. And as of 4 years ago, the SEC was still writing all the rules, and they were up to 12,000 pages of regulations. So for a firm like Goldman, with this kind of increased regulation, it's no problem for them to spend another $1 million hiring another 20 or several $1 million hiring another 100 accountants, a couple of attorneys to wade through it all. But for a small startup firm, having $1 million in regulatory burden is just a big nut to crack.
It's a barrier to entry.
Yeah, it is a significant barrier to entry. Regulations retard competition.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's another reason for a lot of the big firms to prefer the current administration to Trump, who is very, very anti-regulation. In his first term, he cut regulations by 1/3. Now, this administration has, re-regulated a lot of the industries, has increased them, back to the number and beyond. So it just depends on what environment you prefer. Again, my nature is to be a small government kind of guy. I think I make better decisions than a bureaucrat. Some people
about your own money.
About my own money, my own future, my career, what I produce, how I produce it, when I produce it, et cetera, et cetera. And I understand certain basic regulations, but like for me, I'm familiar and have been in the securities industry for decades. I've been a registered rep, principal, started a broker dealer, so I've been through the regulatory ringer, so to speak. I've worked closely with a number of attorneys, securities attorneys on different issues. Testified in court many times. So I've had my face kicked in as far as, regulatory issues. The SEC has thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of regulations. If I was king, I could shuck all of them down to 3 or 4 regulations. 1, pay for what you buy. 2, deliver what you sell. 3, disclose everything. 4, if you don't understand the other 3 rules, stay out of the market.
Yeah.
I cannot think of any other regulation that's needed. You look at Bernie Madoff. He ran his Ponzi scheme for 20 years, had been investigated twice, and there was so much complexity, so much detail that, everything looked okay. It's unnecessary. If you don't know what fraud is, sometimes like the the terms are so tightly defined that if you find a little way outside of that, it's not legally fraud. Well, I don't think you need to list every possible example of fraud that you can think of. And I'm not a lawyer. Erwin, you're a lawyer. You know, this you may disagree, and if you do, let us know. Or any other lawyers out there, that's fine. But I just think that laws that people can't possibly understand, can't possibly know, are somewhat immoral. You're imposing a burden on the population, even somebody that's well trained, that they cannot know, comprehend, and understand. And there are even securities attorneys that have different opinions of different sections of the law.
Different interpretations. Yeah.
Yeah, the law should not be so arbitrary, whimsical, and opaque. Is my point. I think we could do a better job if it was simpler, where everybody understand the rules, the basic idea. So,
And then
regulation.
and if you don't follow the rules and don't understand the basic idea, either as you say, A, don't do it, or B, there's going to be a repercussion for it. We're not going to bail you out. We're not going to fix it.
And that's a big problem. I complain about companies like Citicorp. Citi's been bailed out 3 times so far, and every time it comes back bigger and worse. It's just like, I have rules for life, and my rule number 2 is stupid should hurt. In fact, we have it embossed on the back of the Moffat on Money hats.
I've got one around here somewhere. I think it's over there.
It's okay.
That's in my America Strong today.
And we have gotten away from people, corporations, whatever, suffering the consequences of their acts. Subprime crisis. Every one of the major investment banks knew what they were doing, knew what they were pawning, just didn't disclose it. I don't think the CEOs ought to be receiving multi-million-dollar bonuses and keeping their multi-million-dollar salaries after that debacle. Just on and on. I could just rant about this all night.
If we let him, he will.
Yeah. As an independent Canadian following USA politics, I believe she would weaken the economy and stature of the U.S. in the world. And economically, her immigration policy, or lack thereof, I want to assume.
Yeah. You can only, I think, put so many words or letters in a.
Yeah, that's no problem. But yeah, that's an issue to me. So the ban on price gouging, I'm not sure exactly what that entails. Without that, I can't really judge the impact, but let's say I'm not optimistic.
I think it sounds like a really good idea to some people who think they're getting gouged.
Yeah, she argues also that she will lower prescription drug costs.
Good luck with that.
And yeah, it can be done. And, for example, in the 90s, Hillary, I was trying to remember what the drug was. Was it insulin? She signed an agreement to buy insulin and became the number one customer buyer of insulin to distribute through Medicare, Medicaid, or whatever, to pay for it. And, she locked down the supply so much that, and, cut the price so much that some of the competition dried up. And so there ended up being a shortage. Second main thing is if you cut, and this is something I've got a problem with personally, Americans pay a lot more for pharmaceuticals than the rest of the world does. And the reason is because we end up funding the research. To bring a new pharmaceutical to market, it costs the pharmaceutical companies about $2 to $4 billion a drug because they'll have hundreds or even thousands of different versions that they had to try to produce, test that didn't pan out, had some other complications, some other issues, et cetera, et cetera. So a huge waste of money, and I can't call it a waste because it's how they find out what does work, but a huge sunk cost. A lot of money goes into it to produce a drug. Well, that cost has to be recouped and, a profit to keep the pharmaceutical company in business and continuing to do research. Well, Americans bear the brunt of that research cost. A lot of European countries, a lot of the socialized medicine countries won't buy the drugs at the same price the Americans pay, which if everybody paid the same price, that price would be far lower. Ellen looks like she's got something eating her craw. Can't hear you. Lost your voice.
I muted myself so I was typing and wouldn't.
Thank you.
There's only 2 countries in the world that allow commercials on television for pharmaceutical companies. Are you
And
aware
that's
of
another
this?
thing too, is it? Yeah. Has anybody
US and
seen
New Zealand.
has anybody seen a drug advertised and they think, hey, that's what I need? I watch them and particularly when they start listing all the complications, I'm like, oh hell no.
But they
Whatever I'm
spend
afflicted with, oh hell no.
Yeah, but they spend billions of dollars on the advertising alone,
Yeah, and
and
I'm like, what good does that do? I
none.
don't think I don't think it informs the consumer. I don't think it helps them make better decisions. So if it doesn't do either one of those, why are they advertising? There's some other reason.
How many what percentage of average Americans do you think understand the pharmacology of any given drug?
At sub 1%. I
So,
don't know how small it would be, but it would be a small number.
if my doctor tells me that I should take something, okay, what are the side effects? Let's talk about it. What's going on? If some idiot on television or some actor or some singer or whatever or famous person tells me that I should take a medication, wh- what?
I don't pay any attention to them. I don't think most people do. So I look, they're pouring billions of dollars into advertising.
Mhm.
Why? Because it doesn't persuade the consumer. Why? And I'm sitting there thinking they get very favorable coverage in the media. They don't get a lot of critical coverage in the media. The media is shooting up advertising revenues. So, when I think, why are they spending billions and billions of dollars when there's so much going on under the surface with some of these, pharmaceutical drugs, some of the vaccines, the consequences, the things that were concealed and hidden,
In
the
my
media
humble
still has
opinion,
not covered them.
in my humble opinion, so they can control what's being said and they can keep lining their pockets.
That is the only reason I've been able to come up with as to why they're spending the amount of money they do on advertising so that they can be modestly influential in terms of what the media covers it and how's it presented. I honestly, and if somebody has another idea or reason, would love to hear it. Absolutely would love to hear it. Please, feel free to chime in. But I,
As
I
some
haven't been able to think or find another reason.
as someone who has depression and takes medication for depression, when they do these, if you add this to your current depression medication, and then it's like it may cause risk of suicide, it may cause more depression. I'm like, what are you people doing? What is
Yeah.
the point of this medication?
Yeah. The main thing is either you trust your doctor and he's giving you good information or he's not. If he's not, get a new doctor.
Mhm.
Go to one and tell him what the problem was with the previous one, what you expect. You want to make informed decisions. If I encourage everybody to do that anyway. My I go and I ask questions. I want to know what's good, what's bad, what's indifferent. I want to know if he would use this same drug. I want to know if he has any contract or research grants from the pharmaceutical company, any arrangements with the pharmaceutical company. everybody ought to be everybody has the right to make informed decisions. You can't make informed decisions if you don't have the information. So you have got to make sure you're asking the questions. If your doctor is hesitant in answering the question, that's all you need to know. You go find you a doctor that doesn't hesitate, who
Yeah, you
isn't
you can't
shocked by the question.
yeah, you can't claim ignorance if you're not willing to ask the questions or if your doctor is ignorant.
Yeah. Yeah, there are good doctors out there. There are doctors out there that aren't as competent. And I mean, like on these vaccines, they make big money. Most people would be shocked at how they're compensated if they have over, oh geez, I forget the exact number. We've talked about it before. If they give over 100 COVID vaccinations, they get an extra, it's like 20 or $30,000. They get a bonus. So, and I'm not going to say that's good, bad, or indifferent. I personally have an issue with it, but my point is, if your doctor is being compensated on that basis, you ought to know about it. That you, to me, that's informed consent. You can still agree with your doc and say, good, you got a family to feed, make the bread.
So, Erwin, I'm gonna circle back on this a little bit. I think some businesses see where there is a great benefit to have the Democrats or Kamala as president because pharmaceuticals will absolutely benefit from keeping a Democrat in the White House. I don't think that they will benefit as much if Trump is in the White House.
They will probably lose a lot because RFK, if he will be
Mhm.
the czar over the FDA, the CDC, I don't know. I don't know exactly what his position will be, but that's what's been implied. He will come at them with a vengeance. And whatever, buddy buddy agreements they have with the government, whatever contracts they have with the government, whatever, careers they hope to have in government, or I mean the government regulators hope to have with these companies, all of that is drying up and going away, or I believe it will.
Yep.
And so it'll be an entirely different environment for pharmaceutical companies if RFK gets, becomes the health czar.
I think we just did the weave, Trump's weave.
Won't be the last time.
No, it won't.
She has
All right,
zero
Erwin.
experience running or understanding a business, big or small, no clue in foreign policy, as we are near World War III. And, again, I'll fuss at the media, to no one's surprise. They're not covering that at all. There's no mention of that. Iran has nukes, Israel has nukes, Russia has nukes. Ukraine is sacrificing every young male 16 to 65. France, after World War One and World War II, had lost most of its warrior class, and went through a decades where there just weren't that many men. Ukraine, that has severe social consequences on the family, on kids, on rearing, on the tempo and politics of the country. It has some long-term implications, and it's a war that Ukraine cannot win. They're running out of men. Russia is only gaining more and more territory. They both want peace. There was a peace agreement agreed to a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, the Minsk Accords, and the U.S. and Great Britain killed it. Because why? More war? I don't know. But World War III is increasingly a concern.
Yeah. Clay, who is solely responsible, in my opinion, I guess I can't say that you believe the same thing, for getting Ukraine into that war with Russia?
The U.S., Britain, NATO, who kind of broached,
who told Ukraine they could be a part of NATO?
Yeah. And was working toward it and kept extending NATO's borders when back in the 90s when the Soviet Union fell, part of the agreement and all was that NATO would not encroach on Russia's borders and would, keep buffer states in between. Well, they've repeatedly broken that commitment. In fact, there was even a time when Russia sought admission to NATO. Relationships were good. They were a big aid in the war on terror. We had no idea what was in Afghanistan, and they sent us files on the different tribal leaders. They sent us maps of their tunnels. They have an exhaustive tunnel network. Ellen? Oh, she was saying she'll be right back. And, they were an ally in the war on terror. They have, and the weird thing is in Syria, they've been fighting Al Qaeda and ISIS while we were training Al Qaeda and ISIS. I'm like, what the hell? It's just bizarro world. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of consistency in our goals and principles. And, I think that ends up being a big problem. So World War III, or potential for it, to me, is a vastly underrated topic. A few other comments here. Doctors are sheep. They follow the herd for fear of lawsuits. Doctors are increasingly losing their ability to render informed opinions. They, most of them now visit patients with a computer and they enter in your symptoms. And then the computer directs them on, questions to ask and then treatments that they're allowed to give. It's not exactly going online and, Googling the Mayo Clinic diagnosis for whatever ails you, but increasingly, I'd rather have a doctor with good clinical skills and good intuition. I don't expect perfection. And I know for damn sure we don't get perfection out of the computers. But if I don't like my doctor, don't trust him, don't think he's, skilled in that regard, I'll find another one. I'll find one who is. And yes, the fear of lawsuits drives a lot of medicine now. When I was in surgery, most surgeons had a day a week or a day every 2 weeks where they would just meet with attorneys. I remember I was working in surgery in 90, maybe 2000. Mom had come down with Lou Gehrig's, and so I'd quit my job, kind of help take care of her, and thought about going back to med school. And so started to work in surgery again. And I was talking to an OB who was giving up OB. He said and this was in 2000, he said his annual premium to deliver babies, the OB part, alone was $150,000. And
my OB quit for the same reason in 2003.
Yeah. He charged $3,000 per delivery. So he had to deliver 50 babies just to pay his insurance. And it was getting ridiculous. And, there were anything that, doesn't go perfect, they get sued. And he's like, spending all my time in court, have these huge fees. It's just not worth it. I just do GYN, have a nice life,
If you kept attorneys and insurance companies out of medicine, seems like it would be a lot more profitable for them and a lot more beneficial to us.
Well, it's just, I think and I have seen some doctors who are incompetent, who masquerade as competent. And, sometimes the patient needs some recourse to address serious issues. But as, more and more attorneys have gone in the field, a lot more of these lawsuits have been, you just end up with a lot more frivolous suits.
Yeah.
Because everybody needs to get paid. And a lot of times the attorneys find it cheaper to settle. The insurance companies find it cheaper to settle than they do to prosecute the case. So it's just a complication of the real world. Erwin talks about, Trump wants oil. We actually are going to talk about that in a minute, so I'm going to delay that. And in terms of World War III, North Koreans, most people I hope have seen where the North Koreans are sending troops to start fighting in Ukraine. So if we're going to do World War III, let's go ahead and kick it off.
Fight in Ukraine, North Koreans.
Yeah.
Okay. For
Russia.
I was a little bit confused. I was
Yeah,
like,
sorry.
Wait, what?
Sorry. I know you've been busy and running around. I saw that the other day. North Korea has been supplying Russia with artillery shells and some munitions. And now they're contributing troops because they want their troops to be battle experienced. They want to give them combat experience, which they haven't, been involved in any war or actual shooting or military exercise since 1960s. So, countries are joining in. Another policy that VP Harris advocates is raising the minimum wage. I won't talk
Lord.
about this a whole lot. All I can say is that the real minimum wage is zero, not having a job. Hikes in the minimum wage discriminate against the low educated and poor, the economically challenged, because it makes it harder and harder for them to get a job. It makes it harder and harder for them to gain experience so that they can get a better job.
Better job. Yeah.
And if you look at McDonald's, I mean they've probably created more millionaires than any other company in the world. You start out flipping burgers for, whatever price. You do that for a year or two. You're on time, you're a good employee. Yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. You mind your manners. You're probably going to get promoted to assistant manager. So, after a year or two. So now you're, making 40 to 50,000 a year. You learn, about a little bit about inventory management. You learn how to control the register and reconcile some of the books. So you improve your skills. You do that well for a few years. You get to, promoted to manager. Might start off on, the evening or night shift, but you get promoted to manager. So now you're making 70, 80,000 a year. You learn more about running a business, hiring and firing employees, this kind of stuff. You learn more about, working with the general manager, with the corporation, ordering, maintaining inventory. You do that well for 3 or 4 or 5 years. You might become a general manager where you're overseeing 3, 4, 5, 10 stores. Now you're making, 150, 200,000 a year. You do that for a few years. McDonald's will offer you your own franchise. The least a McDonald's generates in revenue a year is $1 million. Every McDonald's. So you've been handed basically the opportunity to own $1 million asset, revenue generating asset. Few years, you can add a second one, a third one. You can build your own status and hence becoming a millionaire.
Little empire.
Yeah.
Real quick, guys, I know I'm always doing this back and forth, looking at all the screens. Rumble. I know that you see that we have comments from YouTube. I am watching Rumble comments. So if you guys have a question or a comment or want to add anything, pop it on there. I'm watching and I will relay it to Clay.
Yeah, she can copy and paste it or just read it out loud. Another proposal of that Harris is keen on or has mentioned, and I'm going to lump several of these together. One, increase the small business deduction from 5,000 to 50,000. She's also argued once or twice for a middle class earned income credit and increasing the child care credit to 6,000. So all three of these are targeted toward low income, but I don't call them a tax cut because, like the earned income credit, even if you have zero income, you still get this tax credit. It's a redistribution, it's not a tax cut. So she has, in terms of reducing quote unquote taxes, they're actually not tax reductions per se. They are redistributions, policies. And the child care credit of $6,000 goes to, anybody that has a baby. Now, I think we ought to encourage childbirth. You can look at the demographics, the declining birth rate, this kind of thing. I don't think that is the proper solution. I don't think that's one enough of a stimulus to really encourage a woman to have a child. But it's just additional money paid out to women who have multiple children, regardless of the environment or how they're raised or, cared for. I know Hungary, has stated that a woman who has, I think it's 3 children or more, is exempt from income tax on anything she earns for the rest of her life. Trying to
Wonderful.
trying to, increase the birth rates, but they have a very high marriage rate. They don't have a high single parent rate. And, the way our welfare system is set up, it really discourages women from, being in a marriage, and if they're on welfare, it discourages them from getting married and having a stable home environment. It's hard to raise kids if you're having to work or, if you're unemployed and doing odd jobs, whatever. So the key is we need more children, but we need more children raised in good homes, stable homes.
That brings me to something that I read earlier today about one of Trump's new things or things that he's going to try to implement is that, and the way it was worded was interesting. Families, okay, who have a baby in the first, I don't know what the time period was, any of the expenses can be written off on your taxes.
Was it just for adoption?
No.
Oh.
Families with new babies. But it said families. It did not say single moms or
Yeah.
single dads or whatever. It said families. So
And
I'm wondering about that.
and please understand, I'm not knocking single parents. Ellen was a single parent, I was a single parent. I'm just talking about the data, and the data shows very clearly that if you want a child who is academically successful, who, goes on to get a good job, have a good career, productive member of society, doesn't break the law, ends up, having kids of their own, the single greatest factor in that result
Is a two-parent family.
is a two-parent household. There's nothing else. It's not income level, it's not region, it's not culture, it's not religion. You can go on down the list. The single greatest factor is a stable two-parent family. Moms are important, dads are important, and they both contribute to the well-being, the healthy development of a child. Science says. I hate that term, but I'll go ahead and throw it out there.
Yeah, but I mean that's true physically, it's true mentally, it's true emotionally, it's true in every sense of the term. That safety net, that family of having, mother and father there to
Yeah.
raise a child is huge in a child's life. And if you're from a single, parent family, I am, um, you know, you
Yeah, kids
experience it.
Kids from single parents can be successful,
They can.
but statistically, the single greatest factor, two parent, two parents. That's it. So to me, anything that's directed toward trying to increase the birth rate should be, keeping that in consideration. That's what we need to encourage statistically. Harris has also advocated, raising there's putting in a surtax on those who make over 400,000, that magic number again, to 39.6%. So that would be, getting back to the millionaire's tax. France tried it, had to discontinue it. The Netherlands tried it, had to discontinue it.
It won't
It's
work.
been tried many times before. And like I say, capital is mobile. Millionaires will go to, they can move. They're not tied to a specific city, state, country. I mean, Musk has moved Tesla, SpaceX out of California, or is in the process of it. It'll cost him some money, but in the long run, he'll be a lot better off. So, now one thing that is concerning, or a couple things that are concerning, one would be a long-term capital gains tax increase.
About
And
unrealized.
the other is a 25% tax on unrealized gains. Now, she says that will only apply to people who make over 100 million or are worth more than 100 million. And so people go, okay, cool, I'm safe. No, you're not. Think about it. Elon Musk is worth how much? 200 million.
I think it's more than that.
250 billion, 300 billion, pick a number.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, for easy math, it's 200 billion. So he gets taxed on that 200 billion, 25%. So that's a tax of nearly $65-70 million. He doesn't have that kind of cash in his pockets. So how does he raise that kind of money, that kind of cash to pay that tax?
Sells assets.
He sells assets. Particularly, he's selling Tesla stock. He's selling SpaceX stock. He's selling X stock.
Possibly crypto if he has any.
Well, think about Zuckerberg.
Mm-hmm.
His net worth is in the same range. Maybe, a little less, but it's up there. 150 billion. I don't know. So he'll owe, 55 billion in taxes. Where does he get $55 billion? He has to sell Meta. How about the guys with Google? How about the guy with Nvidia? How about the guys? You go on down the list. For most every major company, there's somebody who owns that stock with a net worth in excess of $100 million. Now, all of a sudden, they're going to have this massive tax, and they're all dumping stock on the market. What happens to the market? What happens to the prices of these stocks? Well, let me ask it another way. What happens to the retirement plans of all the employees? What happens to the retirement plans of anybody that's invested in the stock market? What happens to their ability to retire? What happens to their net worth? It all crashes. I haven't heard her, restate this recently. I think, some people got to her and pointed out how insanely stupid this idea is. That it would utterly destroy the economy, destroy the markets, destroy retirements for all Americans. It wouldn't just impact the rich. Again, there's that phrase, tax the rich, make them pay their fair share. That is an extremely dangerous concept if you try to if you try to look at some of these quote unquote ways that, they come up to that people on the left come up to address that problem.
Do you think that there's like this Robin Hood complex? If we tax the rich more, then the poor will get wealthier, or I mean, I don't.
I mean, people talk about Robin Hood taking from the rich and giving to the poor. He didn't. He took from a corrupt government that overtaxed the citizens and gave it back to the citizens.
We need that kind of Robin Hood complex.
Yeah, if you want to honor Robin Hood, his memory, his legacy, the myth, whatever, then do it correctly. Realize it was a corrupt government that he was repossessing citizens' taxes from. So in short, her policies and views consistently have been, continue to be very, very tax increase favorable. She's always looking for a way to increase taxes.
And please also note that when she was asked, literally, if there's anything that she would have done differently in the past 4 years as far as policies, Biden, she said she couldn't think of a thing.
Yeah. And she is even more to the left than Biden is. Most people don't know, but her father is a Marxist economist. I saw one report, and he probably disputes this, is that he was fired from Stanford, decades ago because he was too hardcore communist. Now, I can't say that that's exactly true. He might have just decided to leave and do his own thing, whatever. But I don't have any doubt that she was reared in a hardcore, extremely left economic environment. I'm not going to say she's a communist. I'm not going to say she's a socialist, because those terms, are so pejorative. But nobody, I don't think, will argue with the proposition that she's very far left.
There actually is another explanation. And don't ask me to bring you receipts besides that you can go watch Candace Owens, but she has done a deep dive into this. And Kamala's mother was a nurse, apparently in Canada, where they started the MK Ultra project. And rumor has it that Kamala was part of that project, MK Ultra, which honestly wouldn't surprise me. Seeing about her parents, what they did, and that she kind of just has this weird sort of trauma response to things and changes her mind and says whatever she's supposed to say and doesn't really seem to have recall of what she's said in the past. I don't know.
Yep, don't know. Can't really testify to that one way or another. I will say she is not a gifted public speaker.
No.
That she displays a number of very nervous tics, traits, whatever. That laugh of hers every time she says something, that's generally, I see that mostly in people that are very insecure, trying to gain favor and approval. Can't say I know Vice President Harris well. I certainly don't make any claim to.
Oh, come on. She called you yesterday. What are you talking about?
Yeah. But actually, met her when I was out in San Francisco some.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Huh?
Was at some social functions. She was there on behalf of the city. Yeah, with Willie Brown.
Oh, Lord.
So.
Or when you're going to get us kicked off YouTube.
Yeah, we're going to love you, Erwin, but we're going to let that one pass.
Okay.
All right, let's take a look at Trump's proposals. And some of them to me are fascinating. And I'll detail as we go through a little bit. First of all, Trump has proposed keeping the corporate tax rate low and even cutting it further to 15%. His stated goal is to encourage more domestic investment. And the lower rate would only, at least so far, appears to be only available to those companies who manufacture in the U.S. His stance is that the lower taxes would boost productivity, help companies invest more, help companies feel better about moving their manufacturing to the U.S., help the economy expand and create jobs. I don't really, based on what I've seen, disagree with any of that. And let me go ahead and say this. Some people will argue that Kamala's, for example, earned income credit expansion is a tax cut, and that ought to boost the economy. History shows us very clearly that the only tax cuts that end up boosting the economy are tax cuts on income and capital, savings and investment. Anything else doesn't help the economy. Bush, for example, did, big increases, did the one-time gifts, didn't really notice great economic impact. Whereas Kennedy cut taxes, led to a economic expansion in the 60s. Reagan severely cut income taxes and taxes on capital, led to the longest economic expansion we've ever had in our history. Trump cut taxes on income and capital, and it led to a very strong economic expansion, 2017, 2018, 2019, before COVID slammed everything shut. So again, 2020, I kind of throw out. I don't hold Trump responsible for the response to COVID because, governors were forcing businesses to lock down, people to stay home, not produce anything. And Trump wasn't the one funding the bioweapons lab in China.
Nope.
So I have a hard time blaming Trump for that. In terms of, cutting the tax cuts, I've already said that consumers pay the taxes. So this actually would lower the cost of goods to consumers. So I'm like, yeah, let's give it a shot. Trump also usually has a emphasis on deregulation, making government smaller. So I always laugh when people try to describe him as a Hitler or a fascist. The person who believes in bigger government, more government control, more regulation. Trump's not the fascist. Trump is the anti-fascist, actually.
He actually said he would cut 12 regulations for everyone he put into place.
Yeah. And, when he was in office 2017 through 2020, he cut federal regulations, total number of federal regulations by a third. That's not an idle promise. No. Now, we've seen a lot more regulations the past few years put on energy development, particularly carbon fuel development. And so this has really hindered the amount of capital going into new oil and gas development. And the administration and Harris argue, we need to focus on green energy, so quote unquote sustainable energy but Trump's focus is solely on low cost energy. And I've argued the point several times. You can't have a prosperous, thriving economy without cheap and abundant energy. Saying energy is cheap and abundant is kind of redundant, but
drill, baby, drill.
You've got it. Whatever your means of energy production is, it's got to be abundant. It's got to be cheap because it impacts the cost of everything. Once Biden started clamping down on oil development, killing the pipeline, increasing fees, taxes, regulation, canceling oil leases, all this kind of stuff, the price of oil just kept going higher and higher because people understood the U.S. would be less and less of a competitor. Now, it's worked out kind of a flukish way because when Trump lost the election, all the oil companies that had these leases but hadn't applied for drilling permits saw what was coming down the pipeline. And so in December, January, February, they filed a ton of applications for drilling permits. Well, the Department of Energy still had the same people in it, so they were approving these. as they were coming in. Biden finally stops all approvals in August, gets his people in place, and no further approvals are granted. So there has been a temporary increase as some of these new drilling wells are coming online. But over the past 4 or 5 months, it kind of looks like we're close to peaking. And the number of rigs, the number of drilling sites has actually declined by a third since Biden took office. So you've only got new rigs producing, but as some of the older producing rigs pass peak oil and are shut down, our supply of oil is going to drop, and it's going to take several years to restart that, even if, more favorable policies are adopted. So we very likely will have more expensive energy for a while. Erwin, start move staying away from just testing you on behalf of YouTube. Keep us honest, Erwin.
One
We
more.
love you guys. The thing I like about Erwin is he's not
Uh-huh.
bashful.
No.
I suck at mind reading, and Erwin will just straight up ask questions on any topic, any issue, any thought, and I like that.
Don't be
But there's
afraid to do that.
Yeah, but there are some things that I think
Can't
YouTube
touch.
may not have as much of an appreciation for. And we've lost several videos because we have, offended the YouTube gods. In
Yes.
fact,
The
there's
YouTube.
some evidence that our channel is being shadow banned.
Yes.
We're not
Lots
getting
of
near
evidence.
the exposure, views, whatever that we used to. So,
If only Joe
it's just
Rogan and Elon Musk would come to bat for us,
yeah. It's just something we'll have to work through. So if any of y'all are out there, if you will, hit the like, share, subscribe buttons, send it to your friends, whatever. We love you
Notifications.
guys.
Don't
Yeah.
miss it. I was gonna. Oh shoot! There was something I was gonna say. That'll come back to me. Maybe. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, we're talking about Trump on deregulation and increasing oil and gas production,
Oh,
decreasing energy prices. Hold that thought. Decreasing energy prices. Well, he makes a good point in that if we have lower energy cost, if we can cut some government wasteful spending, if we can prevent illegal immigration, that will all reduce inflation. It will all reduce the cost of goods. It'll reduce the price of real estate. So there's a number of generally positive effects that would accrue to the economy. Yes, ma'am.
the whales, the windmills in the ocean, and the whales. I had never heard that before. And when Trump said it on Joe Rogan's podcast, I actually looked it up. It's true. It's driving the whales nuts, the vibration, and they're beaching like in record numbers.
Yeah, there is some evidence that the drilling, the construction, doing the sonograms to determine the exact placement, all that kind of stuff contributes to confusion among the whales as well as the ongoing operation and vibration. It is not a well-established concept. Some people still debate it. So, I can't pass it on as generally consensus opinion.
I'm a
Don't
cause and
really know
effect
if it
girl.
is or isn't it. Yeah.
I'm a cause and effect girl,
Yeah. But you see these particularly right whales beaching a lot more where windmills are around. I think that's pretty significant. Erwin, Biden is not a great speaker either, but he is less phony than Harris. That's saying something. I mean, Joe for decades has been known as a fumble butt speaker, constantly open his mouth. Sorry.
That was funny. Sorry.
Constantly opening his mouth and saying something that's just egregiously stupid. I mean, that was his reputation in DC. And Biden and his wife still has 2 days to bury her. I think there's some animosity there. I don't think he's an enthusiastic Harris supporter. I think he feels like he got shoved aside.
And he's
We'll
got
see.
quite the ego. So,
Yeah. He's any politician. Most
have
politicians
to.
do. Yeah. Can't knock somebody with ego if you're a Trump supporter.
Mhm.
I mean,
I'm just saying it.
practical reality.
Yeah.
One other thing is that Trump will obviously make the 2017 tax cuts permanent. And I keep seeing people say these tax cuts benefited only the rich. And I take objection to that statement. One, the tax cut, given to the average family, working family, amounted to about 17 to 18% of their income. The tax cut to millionaires and billionaires was down to, 3 to 5%. In fact, even some brackets actually paid a little more. Now, if you pay $1,000 a year in taxes and you get a 20% tax cut, that's you save $200. If somebody pays 10 million a year in tax cuts and they get a 5% cut, that's $500,000. So is that really a tax cut for the rich? If you look at gross dollars, who's paying the taxes? If you don't pay any taxes, you get zero tax cut. So, I look at the percentages and I say the tax cuts were geared more toward the average workers. And it decreases as you go up the income bracket. The effective tax cut decreases as you go up the income bracket. So it still maintains what we call progressivity. Higher incomes get a smaller reduction, but they get a reduction, which ends up being larger dollars. Anyway.
Now, one thing that I was really excited about is that Elon, of course, accepted. I can't remember what his an acronym for it is, but he's going to go in and look at all the the expenses in government and just get rid of everything that isn't necessary. And he asked Ron Paul to help him. Your daughter
It's
will be
Doge.
happy with that, huh? Doge.
The
Oh yeah,
acronym is
Doge.
Doge.
Doge, that's right.
Department of Government Efficiency.
Mhm.
Doge is also a meme crypto coin that he
Yep.
has teased about for years. So I love that. I think that's hilarious.
But
We did
Ron
want to
Paul,
point. Yeah,
I know you're not a big fan,
yeah, I like
but your baby
Rand a
will be
lot.
happy.
Yeah, I'm not a big Ron Paul fan. I like Rand better. I think Rand's a little bit more consistent.
I
But
like Rand too.
did want to show you this. Oh, my graph's not up. None of my screen is up.
Well, JD Vance, smartest of 4 people running this Tuesday. Great speaker
Is
and thinker. Oh my
is
god,
that
you
what?
had this for everything?
Yes.
We haven't seen any of it.
Y'all, okay. Y'all,
I
I
didn't
put
know
a
you
lot
did
of
a PowerPoint. Sorry.
here we go. I put a lot of time and effort in this, so I want to make
Here's
sure that y'all get to see it.
here's the quick run through.
Yeah. Hope that helps. I
Well
promise this is
played.
just water. Anyway, I did want to show you this graph, for Trump. If you'll note, and this is from his this is from the Tax Foundation. I just, stole the graph from them. But it shows here prior to his tax cut, taxes would start at about 18,000. After his tax cut, it moved up to about 50,000. So for the lower income earners, greatly reduced their taxes, both in terms of percent and the dollar amount. It was a significant amount for low income. And you can see, consistently that the most any bracket, there's a significant tax cut. Now the dollars involved, this is in dollars, this is not in percent. The dollars involved, the more taxes you pay, the bigger dollar amount you save. But in terms of percentage, This is a much higher percentage than the 140,000 percentage. So, yay, my graph.
I'm sorry, but I started out this way with the squirrel, and then that just cracks me up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, you know, I kind of like when you popped up the screen in the back of my mind, it was up. Didn't even think about it.
Sorry.
It's all right. Some miscellaneous ideas. You know, Harris had some, Trump has some. These are ideas that haven't received a whole lot of coverage or discussion. But Trump is big on maintaining the dollar's reserve currency status. Now, being the reserve currency means it's the currency of business. And if you travel internationally, you can take the dollar anywhere and spend it. It's taken most everywhere. In addition, most foreign trade since World War II has been done in the dollar. Now, this status is kind of under threat. And the problem is that this status being the reserve currency makes it a whole lot easier to sell US assets such as treasury debt. You know, China, Japan have huge amount of dollars flowing into their country from trade. Well, they take these dollars and they'll buy treasury bonds. This demand helps keep the price of bonds down. If you remember the teeter-totter, when the price of bonds drops, the interest rate rises. Well, if there's a lot of demand for the bonds, the price rises, which lowers the interest rate. So having demand from China and Japan makes it cheaper for Americans to finance their debt. It keeps interest rates lower. But if China, Russia, South Africa, Venezuela, Brazil, even France, Germany have applied. The oil countries, Saudi Arabia, are all moving their trades away from the dollar. And this administration, the current administration, their chief economic advisor, which he doesn't have a degree in economics, he has it in political science, but he thinks it's okay to lose the reserve currency status, that we'll be better off.
No.
And no, just no. That's all I'll say about that. Just no. Maintaining the reserve currency status is important, but this administration has been hell-bent on undermining that at nearly every opportunity. Second thing I like about his plan is he opposes the CBDC, the central bank digital currency. And we've talked about that on some of the shows where we address cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. How if the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, starts issuing a digital currency, a central bank digital currency, that it has a lot of implications. First of all, everything you do, buy or spend, will be known to the government, just like it is in China with their social credit scores. Secondly, if there's something they don't want you to buy, they can block that transaction. So if they don't want you buying ammo, for example, they could block your ability to buy ammo. Third possible problem is, sometimes to stimulate the economy, they want to increase people's demand for goods, increase their buying goods. So, they don't want them saving money. They want them spending it, creating demand. Well, with a central bank digital currency, they can put a time limit on that money that you're paid. So your employer pays you $1,000. They can put an expiration date on that to where it will expire in 4 weeks. So you can't save it. You can't put anything aside for retirement. You have to spend it.
That will you can
go ahead.
You can lose your vacation days or sick days. They won't roll over sometimes, however the company is structured. They can just be like, you don't spend it, it's gone.
Yep. Exact same thing. Mm-hmm. So it will, increase your dependency on the government. It will increase the information that government has on you, your likes, hobbies, interests, whatever. In a emergency crisis without paper currency, if electricity goes out, you can't buy anything. It's all digital. So there's a lot of risk in a central bank digital currency. It's just a backhanded way to greatly increase the government's power over your daily affairs, over your future. Another thing Trump would do is he would cancel Biden's rule on emission standard for autos. The Biden administration, in trying to, let me say, encourage adoption of EVs, has come up with some ridiculous emission standards that will pretty much eliminate internal combustion engines in 10 years.
So we can just take our
Which is,
power grid down and we'll be great.
yeah, which is actually a lot of countries have had this same goal. It's called zero emissions, and they're finding out that it's just not possible. That there's too many complications. I won't go into all of them, but Trump would, do away with this standard. And even the fact that the president can artificially impose such a standard is bothersome to me. Nonetheless, Trump's also proposed a tariff, 60% on Chinese goods and 10% on all imported goods. Now, this is, some people complain about this and talk about how inflationary it would be. Probably 25 to 30% of the goods you buy are imported or have some component from China. That percentage is actually falling. I don't really know what it would be now, maybe 20, I don't know. But a lot of the production has moved to India, Indonesia, Vietnam, whatever. And that's because of the tariffs Trump put in place in 2017. Trump considers China, the Chinese Communist Party, to be an enemy. And part of his rhetoric is to get them to pay for the damage they inflicted with COVID, which he argues, and rightfully so, that it was, formulated in their bioweapons lab, paid for by American taxpayers with American researchers. Whole different topic. But anyway, so he's wanting to make China pay for that. And he's wanting to stimulate industry moving out of China as well as moving into the U.S. So if you manufacture your goods in the U.S., there would obviously be no tariff. Another thing he has suggested, and I don't know that I'm in favor of this, though I can see the logic or the attractiveness of it, is to cap credit card interest rates at 10%. Now, I'm going to be, simplistic overview. You've got people who can't pay off their balance every month that
Hang
they
on.
use a credit card for.
I'll be back in 5.
Okay, thank you. And they pay, 25, 30% in interest, and they're getting creamed. They're running up balances and interest charges they just can't afford. So capping it at 10% would be an huge help to those people. Then there's the people who have credit cards and put everything on it and pay it off at the end of the month. I do that. Well, I get, 2.5, 3, 4%, depending on the nature of the item I buy, back in cash or airline miles, whatever. So it ends up being reducing my cost to put everything on a credit card, then pay it off at the end of the month. And I don't think, there's a part of me that thinks government shouldn't interfere in the market. But I'm not sure, again, that people are making informed decisions. They don't really understand the nature of the interest charges. They don't really understand how that works against them. the banks haven't done a good job communicating it to the poor and middle class. In addition, some of them are just trying to make ends meet to buy groceries, whatever, and so are having to put it on the credit card. So yes, I can kind of see the attraction to cutting the rates. It's not something that I wholeheartedly endorse, but I can't say it's totally unreasonable either. Um, but that's another idea of his. Irwin, JD Vance, the smartest of four people running this Tuesday. Great speaker and thinker. I got to admit, when Vance was first announced, I was a little surprised. Didn't know much about him. I mean, he hadn't been a senator terribly long, and hasn't really been noted for any much of anything. But I thought, okay, he's from Ohio. He won the election in Ohio. He's obviously got something going for him, and he can help with the state maybe. But I'll be damned if watching him more and more, if that statement isn't right. He's sharp, he's witty, he's intelligent, he's good natured, he connects well with people and audiences. He just seems like a good guy, and he doesn't he's put a few of the interviewers in their place, pointed out very efficiently some of their gross misstatements, which I kind of enjoy. And a smart wife. I mean, they just seem to be a pretty great team. I think she's a little bit more liberal than he is. But that's the thing. I've got, a lot of friends that are on the other end of the political spectrum to me, and have had, close relationships with many of them. And what we end up, understanding is that we want the same outcomes. We want upward mobility. We want, the poor being able to take care of themselves. We want peace. All these things. You can go down the list. We just have different paths to getting there. And that's the great thing about, free speech, uncensored speech, is you can discuss and present alternatives and, discuss the different paths and try to figure out which one's the best. That's kind of what we do on the show. Encourage contrary thought, contrary opinions. More than welcome to express them. Much respect. But I think that's how we learn and how we ultimately progress. My rule number 2, stupid should hurt. Stupid is the inability to express contrary thought and have it, listened to politely and discussed reasonably. Vance versus DeSantis in 4 years. I would say Vance versus DeSantis versus Vivek versus Gabby versus RFK. And you'd probably throw a few others in the mix. Depending on the role that Vance plays, he might be a heavyweight. I love DeSantis as a governor. I think he's a good guy. I think he's sharp. I think he's done exceedingly well. But all that didn't translate well on the campaign trail this year nationally. Of course, I guess Trump had such a huge head start. Nobody really paid much attention to anybody else. So it'll be a whole different world in 4 years, regardless of who wins this election. And it'll be interesting to see, what happens in the primaries. Obviously, if Harris wins, she will be the Democratic nominee in 4 years, barring, absolute catastrophic disaster. But on the other side, on the Republican side, it could be an interesting fight.
I sent you an email, Clay, that Jane asked.
Moffat on Money or?
No, work.
Okay. Is that the pick from earlier?
Yeah.
All right. While we're waiting on that to come, let's talk a little bit about the economic impact of the policies. Um, taking a look at Harris's tax hikes are substantial, and there's been no mention that I've seen of any cutting or reducing in government spending or even trying to improve efficiency. Doesn't even argue for it. Her taxes generally target capital and the creation of it, the wealthiest earners, corporations. We all kind of, say tax the rich. Not all of us, but it's a common phrase. Make them pay their fair share. Only problem is if you tax the capital of the rich, they have less capital. Less capital is less investment. Less investment is less growth in the economy, less new creation of jobs, less opportunity for everyone. That's a problem. The ripple effect on the broader economy of those kind of tax increases, just systematic throughout the whole system, will be meaningful. I mean, if history and reason have anything to do with it. A corporate tax rate of 28% would make the U.S., if not the highest, among the highest in the world, developed nation-wise. It'll discourage, there's no doubt, but what it will discourage foreign and domestic investment. And this will just be a continuation of what we've seen as kind of a disturbing trend in the economy over the last few years of lower energy development and continued full-time job losses. Payrolls just came out last week, and we're up to 1.8 million full-time jobs lost in the past year. How many more? How much longer? We see, GDP being more and more just government spending. The private sector is getting hammered. Job openings have crashed. I could go on, but you get the idea. The continued government growth, the higher taxes will just increase cost to consumers on all goods manufactured in the U.S., which will make those companies less competitive, which will increase cost to the consumer. Now, her plan to fund green energy may create jobs, but they would be very concentrated in specific sectors such as renewables, healthcare. And this at a time when the market is turning away from quote unquote sustainable energy. It just hasn't, fulfilled its promise. Ford, for example, you see a nice little picture here of their electric truck. They just shut down this EV plant for months after cutting its workforce earlier in the year. Nobody's buying it. Nobody wants it. Even Tesla has had several price cuts to help move inventory. And, if you look at the US government in terms of its history of promoting industry, it's a proud, extremely proud, well established history of making bad investments. I could talk about the green energy investments under the Obama administration, like Solyndra. Solyndra manufactured solar panels. They received, a $550 million loan grant or loan guarantee from the U.S. government. 2 years later, they were bankrupt, out of business. Some of the American solar panel manufacturers wanted to sell solar panels in China, so they had to give China their intellectual property, their recipe for manufacturing these panels and the components and everything that was done. China required that kind of information. And so China took that information and started manufacturing solar panels themselves, and they undercut the U.S. producers' cost. They were selling panels cheaper than the U.S. producers could produce them. So it drove all the U.S. producers out of business. Now China has a near monopoly on solar panels, and the cost is obviously soared. But U.S. companies like Solyndra went out of business, and the government, taxpayers, get stuck with the tab. How about Amtrak? High-speed rail initiatives. Since its inception in the early 70s, Amtrak has received billions and billions and billions of dollars. It continues to lose more and more money. Has never had a profitable year and is just hooked on government support. And who rides Amtrak anyway? There's a corridor between Baltimore and DC maybe that's, used a fair amount, but most of them no. You could take the government funding of bad investments further back. Synthetic Fuels Corporation. Most of you probably won't remember that there was an oil embargo in the 70s. And there was this huge, desire among some to try to develop alternative energy, alternative fuels. And so back in 79 or 80 under Carter, Congress passed an $88 billion bill to provide funding for this type of development, which back then, $88 billion was a slug. So government has a long and proud history of funding the wrong tech. And that goes back to the old adage, capital in the private sector seeks its highest and best use.
That's like, I mean, as far as tech, why don't you leave that stuff up to people like Elon who know how to do it and do it right?
Well, the thing is, when individuals invest, when the private sector invests, it does so because it's looking for a return. It's looking for the best opportunity. It's looking for something that's the most innovative. When government funds something, do any of those issues matter? No. Not only no, but hell no. They're generally paying money to political associates, political cronies, people who share the same ideology. It's a political payoff. It has nothing to do with the best investment.
We're from the government and we're here to help.
Yeah, exactly. So, the government would be investing in tech that the market is rejecting. That just never works out well. So looking at, the Trump's impact, his tax cuts, a lot of people say, hey, I've seen, a number of economists try to project what the economic impact of some of these are. And to me, it's kind of amazing. They just completely, ignore history. Because when they do their projections, they completely ignore the probability or even the possibility that the tax cuts will spur economic growth. They assume that the economy is going to grow at this rate, whatever, regardless of the tax policy. And, we do know a couple things. One, when the economy doesn't grow, only the rich profit. We've seen large corporations, we've seen most of the income and profits from the market going to the rich when the economy is not growing. And, we talked about how, some of these proposed tax cuts aren't cuts in investment, savings, capital. They're a redistribution program. Redistribution programs don't spur the economy much. We saw Kennedy cut taxes on income and savings. We saw Reagan cut taxes on income and savings. We saw Trump cut taxes on income and savings. We have seen that we've had 3 very good labs with all consistent results. And in between that, we've had other tax rebates, we've had stimulus spending, we've had earned income credit increases, and their impact on the economy has generally been pretty much nil.
Let's get to a couple of these comments when you're done with your thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just really not an academic debate. And so if you look at this chart, people talk about Trump tax cuts will reduce revenue. Well, here's what the tax cuts actually did. Here was the tax in the federal tax revenue. Obama's last year, 3267. Trump's first year when the tax cuts began, 3316. Second year when they were in full effect, 3329. There's no cut. Tax revenues are increasing. People have more of their own money. The economy is growing. Fewer people are on welfare. Poverty is decreasing. More people are working. Tax revenues are increasing. 2019, 3462, again an increase. The only decrease came during the COVID year when you had the lockdowns. Again, I don't hold Trump responsible for that. Well, how about Biden? After the lockdowns and all the stimulus money, tax revenues came in at 4 trillion. 22, 48, 23, 44. So there's a decrease. Now, this 24 is projected based on current tax receipts. It shows an increase. But the only decrease we've had is in an administration that increased taxes. The only decrease in revenues we've had is an administration that increased regulation and increased taxes, not in the administration that cut regulation and cut taxes. And I could show this same example for Reagan. I could show the same example for Kennedy. So the assumption that revenues are going to drop, to me, is not an entirely valid one. Questions? Whoops, lost the screen here. Sorry. Can you really imagine a conversation of substance between Diamond CEO and Cam Empty Vessel? Surprised he backs this below average brain, but respect him. He does it because the financial relationship between Morgan and the government is extensive. Government's hiring of Morgan officials is extensive. So Morgan has a lot of influence in the government. They want to maintain that. Biden likes train riding and ice cream. Jane, I see parallels between Biden, Kamala, and the Jimmy Carter era. Do you remember when Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House? I do. And I remember that, but I don't know how effective they were. I don't know what the technology was like then. They ended up being removed under Reagan because they were useless and just more complications. Yeah. But I don't know why, other than for PR. Who remembers sitting in gas lines? You probably got to be an old fart to do that. Not that you're an old fart, Jane. Sorry. But I assume you've seen pictures. Whoops.
There you go.
In my opinion, under Harris's plans, I can see that happening again. Her energy czar, Obama's energy czar, both had goals of getting gas up to $6 a gallon. That was, in 2009. They really want to end ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles. And it would be a problem for a lot of people who can't afford, a $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 EV, much less the replacement of the batteries in however many years. I see different people estimating different numbers now. Battery technology maybe is improved, but it's a huge toxic waste problem when they need replacing. It's a huge cost. That's why EVs have no resale value, because after a year or two, people realize that the life is not that much, and so the resale value just crashes. I was okay sitting in the gas lines. I remember one time my car ran out of gas right as I was peeking over a hill, and the gas station was at the bottom of the hill. So as it was slowing down, popped the door open, got out, was pushing it to make sure I peeked over the hill, and then jumped in to cruise down into the gas station. We lived out in the country, or what was the country then, and it was a little old rock building with a couple pumps. Wasn't a lot of traffic, and just kind of slid right up to it. I still don't like lines. I am never okay in a line. Just irritates the hell out of me.
She was going with, you're talking about her age. She's like, it's okay. I was sitting in the gas lines.
Sorry, I read that wrong. Sometimes I read these too fast. Sorry. Ellen, that's why Ellen, has great responsibility, not only tracking all the different stations, but keeping me honest. It's about limiting your mobility. You will own nothing and like it.
You won't have to go anywhere.
You won't have to leave your house. Everything you need will be brought to you. We've talked about that, at some degree.
All right, you got the photo up yet?
I've got to save it to my computer and then open it.
I didn't know how many more slides you had. I don't know.
Yeah. Let me just do this real quick while I am kind of not talking.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Here we go.
Who can name this human? That's our lovely Jane, as y'all know.
Who we do truly love. She's just a great soul. And this guy, don't know if many of you recognize him or not, but he has been modestly influential in Pennsylvania over the past year.
That is Mr. Scott Presler.
Yes. Who has just, is it an exaggeration to say he's transformed the political landscape in Pennsylvania? Completely reversed the registrations from majority Democratic to majority Republican. I mean, for one guy to do that almost single-handedly, that's yeoman's work. So he's gotten a little bit of a legendary status in political circles.
Jane.
Not modestly major. We just bumped into him at the restaurant. But
isn't that cool though?
Yeah. He's done yeoman's work. Got to give him credit. Great show, Clay. YouTube advises you are still in conformity. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you checking that for us. YouTube doesn't talk to us much. At least they'll talk to you.
Exactly right. And Jane, I can see how people respond to him. He's very charismatic. I bet he is. I mean, you'd have to be to do everything that he's done.
Never met him, never seen him really give a long speech, just saw some, kind of brief tidbits, and he seems like just a genuinely warm guy. Just, no pretense, whatever. At least he didn't come across in those times, and just seemed like a, kind of a guy that people could relate to relatively easy. See, and he is all about the early vote.
Somebody asked me about that, Jane. I showed this picture to somebody, and they said, man, he's really tall. And I was like, but Jane's not that tall. No offense, Jane. So I was like, I'm not sure like what the differential exactly is there. You were wearing 3-inch. Gotcha. Okay.
I mean, there's a good 12 to 15 inches there.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to tell in a picture sometimes, though. So I wasn't,
Yeah, Jane's wearing her 3 or 4 inch stilettos.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
All right.
All right, guys. Oh, hang on. YouTube trusts Canadians who listen to USA thought leaders like Clay.
Erwin, your check's in the mail, brother.
Crocs, actually.
There
you go. Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute. Crocs have a 3-inch heel?
They don't have a lift. No. Uh-oh. If they do, I'm shocked.
It is a good photo.
It's a
Gotta
great
admit.
photo. Yes, it is.
Let's see. So talking about, Trump's economic impact, and I'll try to speed this up a little bit. We're getting a little long in the tooth. The problem, in my view, if you look at revenues, they're increasing consistently, but they haven't been able to keep up with the growth in spending. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And to me, for the average American family working the months of January, February, March, and April, most of April, just to pay their federal tax, just to pay their taxes, I think is egregious. I think it's just way too much. And so to me, I think it's would be hugely beneficial to cut that burden. And to add, a little extra perspective on the cuts of capital and investment. The last time Trump was president, wealth inequality decreased. The gap between the rich and the poor decreased for the first time in 50 years. That's a hell of an achievement. The income gains for the lowest quartile, outpaced the gains for the upper quintile. Real household income outpaced inflation. Inflation averaged 0.71% under Trump. It's averaged 5.4 under Biden. Huge difference. 5 times greater, 6 times greater. So saying tax cuts cause a loss in revenue to me is almost intentionally misleading. In terms of some other estimates, going forward, Moody's, for example, estimates that the economy under Trump for the next 5 years would be about 1% higher than under Harris. It's all in the underlying assumptions. You can vary those all you want. So I don't get into specific economic projections, because if you look at economic, projections from economists over the past however long since economists have existed, they're always wrong. Always wrong. So I have inclinations, beliefs. There's some solid evidence that things will be better. I think for the average family, working that much just to pay your taxes is morally wrong. So, those things I support, but I do think there's plenty of room in the government to cut spending. I may be alone in that belief, but nonetheless. So the choice really between the two, choose one: bigger government versus a bigger private sector. That's really what the choice boils down to. And I have not even considered Trump's proposal to eliminate the income tax altogether, which to me just almost boggles the mind. Now, this is a comparison of the proposed tax rates. This is not a comparison of eliminating the income tax, but if Trump's other suggestions to reduce tax rates, and I used ChatGPT to calculate this chart. I didn't have any input into the underlying assumptions. I just, told it to take current estimates and, graph them. And this is what it came up with. So I don't have all the different economic assumptions or whatever that went into it, but it was as unbiased, I guess, of a chart as I could produce. I thought that might be of some interest. But consistently, and you can see the sharpest decline in terms of the effective tax rate. This is tax rate, not tax dollars, is really between the 40 and 80K. In terms of the percentage change, that's pretty significant. It narrows for the 160 and then will widen out for larger brackets. Now, one thing that, like I say, I haven't really considered or talked about much is what happens if Trump and Elon Musk / Ron Paul are actually able to cut government. Trump has mentioned cutting the Department of Education, eliminating the income tax, using tariffs to fund the government. What are the opportunities or concerns there? Musk has stated he thinks he can easily cut $2 trillion out of the federal budget in reducing programs, reducing spending, achieving efficiencies, et cetera, et cetera. I believe the guy. Musk has a pretty good track record of saying what he can do and then doing it. He's taking, space exploration, which had been pretty much abandoned by everybody in the world, and now turning into this mesmerizing event that everybody watches and is looking and cheering. Everybody saw the rocket come down and, into the cradle. We all thought that was impressive as hell. He revolutionized. Electric vehicles have been around for 100 years. Musk made them popular. Musk made them acceptable. The guy's got a track record. So I believe him when he says he can cut spending by $2 trillion.
Give me 1 sec. I'll be right back.
Okay. If you look at current versus, and this is just an example, the economic projections in terms of the debt to GDP, again, a chat GDP chart, not my own. You'll see the effects of more government versus a smaller private sector. Debt to GDP ratio just continues going, almost exponential. Trump, vastly different outcome. And this really doesn't include Trump being able to cut government spending, just restrain it. So, that may offer some different perspective. A lot of people are concerned about Trump's tariffs causing inflation. A couple points there. First, the tariffs he implemented in his first term didn't. They were designed to help U.S. manufacturing and hurt China, and it didn't add up to increased inflation. Now, the tariffs did end up negatively impacting agriculture, which, particularly soybean farmers suffered due to retaliatory tariffs. That could be a legitimate concern again. But his current stance on trade is less what I would describe as less aggressive. Maybe reflecting a learned caution that he acquired due to the unintended consequences to agriculture previously. I think a lot of his comments on tariffs are probably establishing negotiating positions. We'll see. But would I take, an increase in tariffs of, 10 to 20% on imported goods not manufactured in the U.S. as a trade-off for zero income taxes? I would do that every day, all day long, all night long. I would fall back 3 clicks, call for an airstrike to pound the rubble. No mercy. Pound it into fine dust. I would take that trade all day long. I think that would be absolutely a huge boon for the economy. So what would, the impacts of some of this be? Just speculating on the impact of of getting rid of income taxes, which is probably the most interesting proposition that's been made to date. Now remember, prior to 1900, we didn't have income taxes. We financed the whole government, the military, everything off of tariffs. So we've done it before.
Good night.
Good night, Sky. Thank you. Appreciate you joining us. Uh, we'll let your lawyer represent you.
Okay, I know I'm interrupting, and I'm sorry. You know how I
You're
am.
fine.
There is a update on Peanut.
What's the update?
A called-in complaint by Monica Kiesler. She bragged about it on her now deleted Facebook account, Instagram, and LinkedIn. They're all deleted now. So anyway, she has been outed.
She outed herself.
She did. Have you
Um,
done these? Have you looked at these comments?
no.
Okay. You want to finish that and then do it?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Um, no, you're fine. You're good because
Peanut's
that's.
important.
Yeah, I think people are interested in Peanut. I know I am.
Mhm.
Um, but thinking of Trump's tax cuts, just looking at some of the projections out there right now, the total income tax generates about $2.4 trillion in revenue for the government. If you replace it with the proposed tariffs, that would generate probably $1 trillion a year. So you've got a $1.4 trillion difference. So keep that in mind. You'll have a $1.4 trillion deficit. Now, looking at the benefits to an average family making $70,000 a year, it would save about $8,000 or $9,000 a year in taxes. In addition, the additional spending from the consumers, from the individuals having more money to spend and save, would likely, by estimates, double the private sector growth in GDP. So it would go from 2% to 4.5, 5, maybe 6%. It would be a huge boon to economic growth. This would have additional benefits to Americans. You'd have higher wages, you'd have more jobs, more job opportunities, you'd have more demand for your labor. This, all told, some estimates have it increasing American income or providing a benefit to average American family of $20,000 to $30,000 a year. The doubling of the wealth would make your children, the doubling of the economic growth would make your children 2 to 4 times richer than you are, kind of like it used to be. Now, the deficit, you know, $1.4 trillion increase in the deficit. Well, Musk again estimates he can cut government spending by 2 trillion. If he does that, you've got a smaller deficit than you do now. Cutting the amount of welfare we spend on illegals and healthy people, which has always been an irritation to me. If somebody's healthy enough to work and there are jobs available, they need to be working. They don't need to be on the government dole. I think most people agree with that. There's some government spending that could be cut. You could eliminate the IRS, for example. I just don't think you'd have too much trouble coming up with $2 or $3 trillion in cuts without hurting the country, except for the now unemployed bureaucrats. You'd have a far simpler tax process and no filing of a form that most Americans don't understand. So, in terms of lowering the deficit with that kind of rapid economic growth, we would be able to narrow the deficit and reduce the debt a whole lot faster than what we have any chance of doing now. The only downside is, what would Congress agree to? The Democrats will oppose it to the man. They don't want to get rid of income taxes. So the question is, how many Republicans would oppose it? And of that, I have no idea. Let me ask you, do you favor getting rid of the income tax? Do you think the country would be better off or not? Let us know. Ellen, Peanut update.
Mhm. That's it. I had another update, but it's not as happy, and I don't want to stress you out. Polly
Well,
Market just flipped Pennsylvania to Kamala.
oh, that's okay.
Okay.
There's been a lot of money dumped on Kamala the past 24 hours.
That's what I was hearing.
Yeah. And part of it could be some of the pro-Trump cashing in on whatever profits they made. Some of it could be new money going into Kamala for hype, or people all of a sudden for whatever reason have just changed their mind. All we've heard the past week is really all the momentum in the contested states, the not the border states. What do you call them? The 8
Swing.
swing states. Thank you.
Hmm.
We're all swinging towards Trump. And so the betting on Trump increased. I haven't seen any change in any of that. So I don't know why the odds are shifting, but right now I'm not too terribly worried about that. We'll see how long that holds up, or if it does. Erwin, China may
Yeah.
move on Taiwan in response to tariffs on China. They may.
Hmm.
USA may not have a taste for war. Um, we could kind of follow the Ukraine strategy, just keep Taiwan supplied with enough stuff to make China miserable and drag it out. I do think if China invades Taiwan, that we have plans to destroy their chip manufacturing facilities, which probably is really what China covets. I don't know the details, but we'll see. Biden should pardon Trump in Fed cases, and Trump should pardon Z. Biden's son, then unify America. It's an interesting idea. I doubt it
Not a
will
bad
happen.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. I doubt it will happen. And I don't even know that that would really unify America. Like pardoning Hunter. A lot of people see him just as a crackhead loser. I don't think pardoning him would make anybody on the left like Trump more or hate him less. Does that make sense?
Okay. Hmm.
So I do think, we need to be more, we've got a long way to go in terms of unification of the country.
Hmm.
But my hope is that the fears that some of the extreme left have of a Trump presidency, kind of like in 2017, none of their fears matured. None of it,
It
was
was
evident.
realized. Yeah.
The economy was doing, everybody was doing better.
Everybody was happy.
And so my hope would be that, over a few years, some of that will moderate due to what I hope would be, increased prosperity all around. Jane, just two dim mega donors causing that shift. And that could be true. Jane usually has pretty good info, so consider that. And part of it is the Harris campaign has had such bad news for the past week, 2 weeks, just one stumble after another. I mean, I commented a week or two ago that every speaker they had made a great ad for Trump. He would even take some of the things they said, replay it on a commercial and say, I'm Donald Trump. I approve of this message. They'd be talking about how much inflation had increased. And like Cardi B was on the stage the other day talking about how much inflation had increased and how, things were a lot more expensive even for her, implying that she's, very rich and done well. That's an ad for Trump. Take that excerpt out. You got Cardi B on there talking about how much prices have increased over the past 4 years. I'm Donald Trump. I approve of this message.
Mm-hmm.
Boom. So the Harris campaign has been hammered by one stumble after another the past week or two.
I don't know if you saw this or not. The two different ads she did, one for Michigan and one for New York, maybe. One she was talking about how awful everything in Gaza was and how she was going to support, you know, the ending the genocide and all this stuff of the Palestinians. And then the other ad was talking about how she supported Israel and how awful that was and how she supports. And they came out like two different states, same day, complete opposite messages.
Yep. And that's just bad form. That's just a bad look. So, and the campaign has been consistent in doing that for the past few weeks. So
It was okay. It was
I think
Pennsylvania.
they needed some good news. And you've got apparently these mega donors that decided, if they can shift the betting markets, that wouldn't rely on anybody in the campaign to say anything. And they get some nice headlines. We'll
It was
see.
Pennsylvania. Okay, because your governor's just got it.
Yeah.
You're free to wear a trash bag to vote. So many people are showing up in trash bags. It's just too funny. I heard that in California. What's going on in California too? And the lady was like, or the poll worker was like, "What is the deal with trash bags? What is going on? I don't
Oh,
get it."
you can't be that oblivious.
Oh yeah, and the woman kind of looked around at everybody else in trash bag, and she was like, "You just need to Google it."
Yeah. You can't explain it.
Mm-mm.
That's funny. So, wrapping up the key points here, it's just two vastly different approaches to government. Harris' approach is to tax corporations and the wealthy more heavily. She's not bashful about proclaiming that and directing those funds to specific programs, green energy.
Mhm.
While there is some potential for stability given our current economic climate, which I think sucks, it may come at the cost of even slower corporate growth and investment, slower private sector growth, which it can't slow down much more without going negative. Trump's plan doubles down on tax cuts, deregulation, um, getting the illegals off of welfare and deporting them, with the goal of trying to unleash growth across the economy as a whole, not just in a specific sector. So Harris's plan is much more targeted. It's almost a moral imperative. Trump's moral imperative is to get the economy as a whole growing. The um, so I'll just let that kind of be the summary. I hope that helps. I always say ideas have consequences.
They always do.
Elections have consequences. Some people say, "Oh, the president doesn't do anything." Well, you just can't look at the previous 8 years and see the differences in the two administrations with pretty much the same Congress
Yep.
and say that things haven't changed greatly. The president has a lot of power, ton of influence.
But I think
Even
we need to get back to not just doing these executive orders
yeah,
and actually the Congress voting on things and getting that through instead of it becoming more of a
yeah.
I'm going to do what
Laws
I want to.
laws should originate with Congress, should be
Mhm.
passed by Congress, signed by the president, and then the president executes them as the law stated. We have long ago abandoned that, and I would love to see us return to that. My only problem with that is if we go to that immediately with Trump being elected, if we reverted to that, there's no chance if Kamala's elected. But if we reverted to that, then there
Mm.
would be no way practically to undo a lot of the regulations and programs that had been implemented previously.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, got to tolerate the abuse a little bit to clean things up. And then
Yeah.
get back. And I
It's like
can't
the board
guarantee that,
clean.
yeah. And I can't guarantee that things will be cleaned up, but I do think the presidency has become a little bit too imperial. It's
Definitely.
almost a
There's
rule by tyranny.
yeah, it is definitely the executive branch definitely holds the majority of the power now, and
Yeah.
that was never supposed to happen.
No. Um,
Um,
Harrison
oh, well,
Con- Har- Harrison Dems will terrorize Trump for 4 years if he's elected. Just like, yeah, it's hard to
if
argue with that.
unless we have um, a majority Republican in the Senate and the House, then there's not a whole lot they can do.
No, but even that, for Trump to get things through, he needs a majority of support with people that agree with his ideas. There are a few Republicans that haven't, that have kind of opposed him on some of the major ideas. So, we'll see how things turn out in a couple more days.
Do you think that's because the Dems have something on them that they
I don't
keep
know.
going the wrong
I
way?
hear that. I hear that. Some of it, I think, is just they've been up in DC for so long, they're entrenched, they've gotten rich. You've got that on both sides of the political spectrum that they, just go along to get along.
Right.
And bottom line, their concern and their welfare is not for the voters. It's not for the people.
That's their
They've
job.
they've gone up there. They went up there poor. They're now multimillionaires. They know where their money is paid from, and they protect that. So I'm like, term limits. Nobody needs to make politics a career. Nobody needs to become, what's Harry Truman's old saying? Anybody that becomes rich in politics is a crook.
Yes,
He's right.
there's you're getting paid a decent salary, but it's not like you're getting millions and millions of you shouldn't be anyway, getting millions and millions of dollars from PACs and special interest
Yeah.
groups and whatever that are padding your pockets. That's not how it's supposed to work.
And you've got all these people that before they entered Congress were lousy investors. Now all of a sudden they become great investors with almost perfect information. Well, what the hell?
Wonder how
Anyway,
that happens.
yeah.
All right.
Let me quickly throw out a couple of other things that I
Mhm.
think people will find interesting.
Sure.
I saw yesterday Jeff Bezos of Amazon sold $3 billion in shares.
Of
The Fed
Amazon?
of Amazon.
Okay.
The Fed has a program called the reverse repo,
Yep.
and it has been drying up. So that kind of indicates that liquidity, the availability of cash in the entire monetary system, is drying up. Have I mentioned elections are Tuesday too?
Yep.
So there are several things going that, kind of make one wonder looking at the market. In addition, Berkshire, which is Warren Buffett, just announced they are freezing buybacks. They're not going to do any more buybacks of their stock. They also announced their cash holding over the past quarter has increased to $325 billion, up from $280 billion the last quarter.
So why would
So,
they stop buybacks?
well, Buffett said that he didn't specifically say this time, but he said in the past that Berkshire would stop buying back the company's stock when the price is too high, higher than its intrinsic, what he calls its intrinsic valuation. So it's kind of Berkshire Hathaway's saying that the price of their stock is too high. It's not a good buy. It's not a good investment. And the cash position, increased $50 billion in 3 months. They're selling Apple. They've dumped Apple. They've dumped BOA.
Mhm.
In fact, their cash position, the amount of money they hold in cash, is larger than the entire market cap of BOA. That gives you some perspective in terms of their size. BOA, Bank of America,
Mhm.
one of the largest banks in the world.
Irwin, but Amazon went up, I think.
Didn't even look at it. Don't know. And his
Other way.
filing can be weeks, up to 2 weeks after the sale. So he could have been, doing it in phases. Don't know offhand the timing.
Yeah, Berkshire isn't apparently is nervous regarding the market
Yeah.
and sold most of its Apple last 13 months as well as
Yeah.
BOA.
Yep. Yeah, he's been dumping a lot of stocks. They were buying $2 billion a quarter in Berkshire stocks. They've said that $2 billion a quarter.
Wow.
Also saw where net institutional selling last week was $6 billion. That's the second highest amount in 15 years. Job openings continue to crash. They came in this week 500,000 below expectations. That's a pretty strong below expectations. Now, something I find interesting that probably most people, won't find quite as interesting. Whoops, sorry.
I tried to add it. Sorry.
Is bond yields. The yields on U.S. Treasury bonds, which underlie the price of every interest rate in the country, actually, are increasing and have increased greatly since the Fed cut rates a month ago. The 10-year bond, which is probably the most significant, is up 70 basis points, which is a massive move in a month. So this is basically the fixed income market, the bond market, which I believe is the most sophisticated, the most quantitative, the sharpest investors out there, is telling the Federal Reserve that they're idiots. So with this kind of information, with the Fed getting the exact opposite response of what they wanted, do they continue cutting rates? Are they going to try to cut again? That'll blow the yields to hell and back. The last job numbers this week, payrolls showed a gain of 13,000. Normally, anything below 200,000 is a poor report. 13,000, pretty damn bad report.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the BLS has been revising payroll numbers, like August numbers, they cut by 50% this month in revising it. Didn't make the headlines, but they cut 112,000 jobs off the previous 2 months.
In November or October?
Well,
it was August, you said, but when did they cut another 50%?
Well, the report just came out this past week. So the end of October, the report was issued, but they publish numbers for September, and then they revise August and July.
Gotcha.
So rates are rising, and think about it this way. Just remember, risk and return are always commensurate. So if you see rates, which are the return on bonds, the required return, if you see returns rising, that's the market saying risk is increasing as well, and we need a higher return to be compensated for it. We see increasing risk. Now, it doesn't tell you exactly what those risks are. If you've been watching the show, you probably have a decent idea.
Yeah.
But risk and return are always commensurate. So if you see rates rising, risk is rising, or the market perceives risk is rising. In terms of practical application for, viewers, home buyers now, as of Friday, can expect an average mortgage rate of 7.23%, which is up sharply from 6.7% a month ago when the Fed cut. Not the response the Fed wanted.
I guess not.
Yeah. So don't know what, do they continue cutting or not? Interesting idea.
Erwin has a comment. Bezos, careful not to piss off Trump or Harris now, so WAPO did not pick a presidential preference.
Yeah, I think that pretty much pissed off Harris because she was banking on it. USA Today also refused to make an endorsement. LA Times refused to make an endorsement.
New York Times?
LA.
I'm asking about New York.
Harris.
Okay.
Solidly in the Harris corner.
Oh, yeah, the guy that owns LA Times, he was just like, I'm not doing it. And one of his major editors quit.
Yep. So an interesting election time. And it'll get even more interesting in a couple of days.
So Moffitt, we're supposed to have a show on Tuesday. What are we doing?
We'll probably, we did previously, kind of live stream the election.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know most everybody, whether you're American or Canadian or wherever, is interested in the outcome of the election. So we'll probably keep, running totals up, and that'll be the Q&A. Just
y'all
discussing.
I can't stay up till 2 or 3 AM. Y'all know that, right? Like, I'm just gonna put that out there. Erwin
According to
says
some states, it may take days to know the outcome, which boggles my mind. In this day and age, we can't count votes.
and Erwin says, "Clay, you are right." I'm not sure which point. I think the WAPO.
Jane, pray for me as you know I'm working the polls. Yeah, I
Honey,
don't envy you. I imagine Tuesday's going to be tough. I've seen some counties, I forget the names of the 2 counties, but, they only had 2 poll workers, and they
holy
had people
cow.
waiting in line for 5 or 6 hours.
That was Butler, wasn't it? County?
Yeah, there were 2 counties. I
Yeah.
forget the 2. And, a lot of people were saying, "I can't come back Tuesday to vote. I have to work." So, that's kind of interesting
Okay,
to me.
first of all, Jane, I know you only can eat 11 things, but I know you can drink coffee. You better get some caffeine. And you I wish you could do like Monster or one of those, but yeah. No, near Philly. Yes, why? What's why?
Washington Post?
WAPO. Mhm. We call it the WAPO down here in the US.
Yeah.
Warren.
So, y'all, I thought those were a few highlights you might be interested in. Jane, is always a wild ride, and I'm sure they won't let me down this election either.
Of course not.
No. Hopefully things go smoother at your
District.
station than they have in a few
Mhm.
others. I believe they will. Fingers are crossed for you. We'll say a little prayer.
Guys, I almost made it 3 hours.
Uh, she did well.
I did.
So
Here's to
go play.
Trump. Yeah.
Will not
Wait,
concede.
neither will the American people. This is gonna be a real big problem. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and
Somebody go ahead.
I've alluded to the fact that after the election, no matter who wins, the other side is going to be pissed. And I would not be surprised to see some chaos, to see chaos increasing after the election. Um, we'll
I
see.
heard
And then,
I heard a comedian in Canada say, "Living in Canada right now is like living in an apartment above a meth lab. We're just waiting to see what's gonna happen
and
down there." I was like, "I can't say that's not true."
I can name that tune in one note.
No, right? So, yeah, we feel for y'all. Okay, I'll report in that. Please do.
Yeah,
I'd
let
love to
us
have
know.
you can hop on anytime. Court challenge is coming Wednesday and Thursday. Of course. Of
We
course.
shall see. It is going to be an interesting couple of months.
Yeah.
If you enjoy the law, we might just have to turn into election law tube channel.
There you go. At least
So,
for a minute
Erwin,
and a half.
you're gonna have your ditties cut out for you,
That's right.
but it will be, yeah. I just don't know what's going to happen after the election. Not sure what's going to happen in the election, but after the election, significant unknown to me. So we'll just look forward to it, and give us something to talk about in the future.
And I promise I will have a charger for my laptop before then. Um,
Okay.
in all of my infinite wisdom, I left my laptop charger at the house. So
Yeah, she's using a charger for her iPad for this computer. I don't know exactly how that works or if that's a good thing. I don't know.
it's dying, and I have a little warning sign up there, but whatever.
Well,
I got
it's
about 5% left.
uh, well. This is it for tonight, folks. Please, if you haven't yet, hit the like button, do the YouTubey things. We do greatly appreciate you watching, your
Yes.
comments, your input. We
Love you all.
enjoy being with you, and we'll look forward to seeing you Tuesday night. So
That's right. We'll be here.
until then, y'all go have a great weekend. Our time is up. We thank you for yours. Good night, y'all.